Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jared with Tier 1 Concealed here, and today we're going to discuss if you are a new shooter, new to guns, and you're trying to figure out how to make bullets go where you want them to go. We're going to discuss some different levels, starting with something you can work on at the range if you're just starting out. Obviously, the first thing I'd recommend is get training as far, definitely as far as safety, safe gun handling is concerned. We're not really going to get into that right now. We're going to assume that you're trying to work on those fundamentals. Let's get going. Today, I'm going to be using a Gen 5 34, and I'm using a Trijicon SRO red dot. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be specific to a red dot, but it will cross into iron sights. A lot of it's similar. First off, before you do this, you need to make sure your gun's zeroed. I recommend bagging the gun, getting a really stable position when you're zeroed, because that's going to take out more of the human error side of things, especially if you're trying to figure this out. It's important that you make sure that your gun's actually zeroed and that you're not zeroing it to your deficiencies, meaning, man, I keep going low left, so I'm going to move that dot to what I'm doing potentially. So getting a good zero is really important. So right now we're going to start at 5 yards. We've got a US PSA target here with roughly 2-inch hand-drawn circles. First thing that we're going to cover here is what does it take to just be accurate, right? That's the first thing that you're going to figure out is how can I make bullets go where they want to go. So you'll hear a lot from instructors, grip sights, trigger, stance. I don't disagree with any of that. However, in order to make a bullet go where you want it to go, for me, if my gun's zeroed, I need to make sure that dot is in the target area that I'm trying to get and that I can manipulate that trigger without moving the dot. My buddy Billy Barton always says there's two reasons why you miss a target. Either your dot or your sights weren't on the target and you decided to pull the trigger, or they were on the target and you moved it off the target as you were pulling the trigger. So I completely agree. So right now I'm just going to present the gun, and I'm actually just going to hold the bottom of the gun like this, right? So zero grip support, and I'm going to try and put a round in that 2-inch circle by just keeping the dot there and manipulating the trigger, right? So let's go take a look. Okay, so now that we understand that grip, as far as accuracy is concerned, is not important yet. So what I would start with is basically just getting used to sights and trigger, right? Understanding that if I don't move it, and I break that trigger, that I'm going to have shots in the acceptable zone. That is the number one thing that you can work on, right? One thing I want to cover is everyone's built different. Hand size, physicality, if you're dealing with injuries, whatever it might be. That's why I say for you, you just need to figure out how to manipulate that trigger without moving the sights off the target. Now we're going to get into grip. So depending on your body type, your hand size, your structure, I like to have as much leverage and friction on the gun because that's where I can start to add speed once I understand how to, return the gun and get the sights and the trigger work done. What grip is going to enable me to do is to fire, recover, and be ready to fire quicker. If I'm holding it really loosey-goosey with one hand, I can get an accurate shot, but the time wasted is trying to come back down and settle that gun. So your next evolution, once you've figured out how to make bullets go where they want to go, this is where grip matters, is I'm going to get a good grip on that gun, same 2-inch circle, and now I'm going to fire, and as soon as the dot returns, I want to already have that trigger reset and prepped so I can make that good trigger press. Right, so that gun's lifting, the dot's rising, and it's settling back down, and I'm ready to pull the trigger when the dot's acceptable. As far as your speed, your sights or your dot are going to tell you what that speed level is that's acceptable, right? And as you get quicker, you'll notice to manipulate that trigger and prep it, it's kind of hard to start prepping it in between each shot. So there's going to be a threshold where you're going to start slapping through that trigger at speed, right? And your target size and target distance are going to dictate to you when you feel okay with what you can get away with. Meaning that if I'm super close, if I come up here and I have this gun and I'm going for the A zone, like the way I manipulate the trigger, I can be pretty sloppy with it and still keep it in the scoring zone. That's not a trigger pull method I would advocate. But as I get further and further back, how I manipulate that trigger can dictate whether I'm going to hit that wall as I'm pulling through the slack and the wall of the trigger, and it's going to influence the gun to move. Another way that you can overcome that, so you can get away with sloppier trigger work, is strengthen your grip and then practice slapping that trigger. So right now we'll go on the head box 2-inch circle and we'll illustrate that. Now I'm going to work on the same thing, same distance, but I'm going to start manipulating the trigger differently. And this is kind of trying to simulate shooting at speed, right? So I'm going to start with my finger touching the front of the trigger guard. And we're going to grab a shot timer here, and we're going to try and react within about 1/4 of a second. That timer is going to tell me when to go, and I'm just going to smash through that trigger. And what I'm really trying to pay attention to is how my gun is behaving. Do those sights, you know, dip hard, low, left, right? How can I change my grip in order to prevent that or mitigate that from happening?
Are you ready?
Ready.
Stand by.
Okay, that was a 21. All right, let's do it again.
Stand by.
Okay, so that was a terrible job. I kind of loosened up on my grip, and I saw my dot as I'm compressing that trigger dip low. Let's do one more. So I need to strengthen that grip.
Stand by.
Yep. Okay.
20.
Still a little bit of movement there. So this is something that I like to come out and do a few reps of, and get familiarized again with getting away with not so great trigger control. That's where the grip really comes in. So let's take a look at this. So right now we're only at 5 yards, right? So this would be unacceptable, but as long as I can tell myself, hey, I saw the dot do this, and this is what I'm going to do to fix it, right? I'm going to strengthen that support hand grip, whatever it is that you can, like, being able to self-diagnose really is the key to getting the most out of your training. So if we back this off at distance, you know, if we went back to 15 or 25 yards, a lot of this would be really, really open. You know, this guy would probably just barely be in the head box, maybe somewhere over here. So a good way to get that feedback, you can start at 5, and as you get good, right, if you're stacking all these rounds in, that tells you it's time to move back. So now we've done basically a full compressed break where my finger's touching the front of the trigger guard. So now we're going to do a touch index where I'm disabling that trigger shoe safety bar, but I'm not taking any slack out of the trigger. So we're going to run that same thing, right? And this is a good way for you to see the importance of being prepped. Okay, so now just barely touching that, we're going to do it again.
Stand by.
Okay.
18.
Okay, let's do another one.
Stand by.
Okay.
21.
Do another one.
Stand by.
I totally cheated.
Oh,
I hate the button on that.
Stand by.
Okay.
17.
One more.
Stand by. 24.
Okay. So let's come down here and take a look. So definitely kind of tightened it up a little bit. Still not great, right? It's been a while. So this is something that I would come out and work on. And then now we're gonna go to a full prep, right? And we'll use this bottom circle so we can see the difference in being fully prepped. And for those of you that don't understand what I mean when I say fully prepped, we'll go ahead and unload this gun. So that's not prepped at all, and I'm just smashing through the trigger, right? So it kind of makes sense when I have 0 resistance into, you know, a pound or 2 of resistance into a 4-pound resistance. It's hard to not move the gun. So that's something you have to train yourself and work on. Soft prep, where I'm just touching it, right? Still, I have a little bit of resistance into a lot more when it breaks. Still has a tendency to want to move that gun. And then a full prep is if I take out all the slack so that I have just a nice, even killed amount of pressure that I have to defeat to break the shot. So now we're going to completely prep that trigger.
Stand by.
Okay.
That was a 15. Stand by. Oh, did not record that one. Stand by. 12. Stand by. 10.
Okay. So let's go look at this target. So for me, I'm still working, right? Every day. I'm not a good shooter in my own head. There's an obvious difference though in me being completely prepped versus me not being prepped or not having a good prep. The thing is that shooting this tight of a group is not always required, depending on the target size, right? Sometimes speed can become a priority over that, and that's where distance from the target, I can get away with sloppy trigger work. But as that target gets further and further away, a good prep and refined sight picture are going to become more important. And that's what we're going to talk about, as JJ Racaza would call it, attack targets versus control targets. So now that we've got kind of the fundamentals, like first off, how to be accurate, second off, the different types of trigger manipulation. And now we're going to kind of illustrate that. And we're going to do some doubles, you know, which is 2 shots. And as we progress further and further back, you'll start to see how I have to modulate how much confirmation I get on that sight or that dot to confidently break a shot. And now we're talking about the A zone. So right now I'm at about 3 yards. That target, how much of my sights do I actually need, right? Because as I'm presenting the muzzle out, I can already see that I'm oriented into the appropriate target zone because we're so close, right? So we're going to send 2 shots and see what that looks like.
Stand by.
Okay.
84.
So obviously with this target size and how close I am, the behavior of the gun, right? I can see that it's going to stay within that target zone. So now let's back up to 5 yards.
Stand by. 91.
Okay. So once again, this is where grip comes into play because I'm wanting that gun and that sight to recover from recoil as quickly as possible while also getting off the trigger, resetting. And if I have time to prep, I can. And that's where this matters, is sometimes you may not get the best of prep. So you need to understand the further we go back, the more it changes. Okay. So now we're at 10 yards, or sorry, 7.
Stand by.
All right.
109.
So here's what's interesting. I presented, came up, had a good dot, and I prepped, and then I fired, and my dot tracked up, and as it was recovering, I'm manipulating the trigger, and I did not have the firmest of grip. So this is something where I'd be like, okay, so obviously I moved the gun. I would say that it was my right hand that moved the gun. So maybe I need to dial on the support hand grip pressure, maybe back off ever so slightly on the other dominant hand just to quiet that movement down. So let's do it again at 7.
Stand by. 122.
So as I'm paying attention to the behavior of my gun, that one tracked up and I mitigated some of the movement. And this is where I'd get picky and say, hey, I'm still not very happy with that. And I would continue to work on that. So now let's back it up to about 10 yards.
Stand by. 107.
First shot's good, right? I've got time to prep. As that gun recovers, I'm kind of slapping through that trigger. So now I really decreased the dominant hand pressure and maybe got a little overbearing. And this is you figuring out your gun and its behavior. So now let's come back here as far as we can get here. So we'll say this is about 15 yards. And during this, I'm trying to maintain as close as I can the same split time, right? The times are probably gonna get longer because for me to get that initial sight picture, like I wanna start in a good spot and not just wing a shot. So the times are gonna be longer. I'm trying to keep the split times, time between shots, relatively close to the same thing, because this is going to tell me where I need to start modulating my sight confirmation.
Stand by.
Okay.
122.
So first one, second one, right there. So you can see that things are starting to open up. And now as we go further back, if I change that target size at this further distance, so we'll go at the head box, now is where basically that sight confirmation and trigger prep are going to start to matter, right? So now I'm going to come up and I have to get a good prep, break, recover, prep, break to keep those in that credit card head box. So everything kind of depends on the target size and distance, right?
Stand by. .183.
Okay, so sights come up, they're stable, I'm prepped, break the shot, gun recovers, I'm prepped, break the shot. So my ultimate goal in shooting would be able to do that with a 19 split, right? So it's just a never-ending work in progress. So these are ways that you can learn to manipulate the trigger. So now, depending on an array of targets, you know, you're going to be transitioning from target to target. Some targets might not require a high level of conformation. Other targets might require that. So now we're going to set up an array of targets where some are low conformation, faster speed, and then some are higher conformation and being more careful. In USPSA, they would call this an open target. So we've got 3 open targets and then 3 partials, kind of simulating a hostage type situation where these are innocent, and so you need to thread the needle to varying degrees, right? On this, the scoring zone is either the A zone in the body or in the head. So that's up to you in your skill level, right? Or the level of conformation you want to take. So now we're going to shoot this, and we're going to try and modulate those levels of conformation and trigger work based on what I can get away with. Target size, target distance. So what we're trying to do here is still maintain 100% accountability. So I'm going to be as quick and efficient as I can while also guaranteeing alpha scoring zone hits.
Stand by.
So you can hear a difference in the rate of fire, right? And then we're not getting into blending targets on this one. So those of you who know about that, you know, hold your horses. So right now, just getting the dot where it needs to be to break an acceptable shot, right? And then me understanding my own weakness or tendencies that I have, I might need to take longer or be quicker depending on how that is for you as the shooter. So this guy at further distance, right? Kind of reduced the amount of A zone available. So had to take a little bit more time or more confirmation. Yeah, we'll tape them up, thanks. That first run, 100% accountability. We're not working from the draw just yet. And just so you know, as far as the draw presentation and all that goes, all of that can be done in dry fire in the comfort of your home with an empty gun, preferably an empty gun. So now when you're out here on the range, you want to know, hey, what does my 100% accuracy accountability look like? And then you can start to push things, right? Because when you're training, that's the time, in my opinion, to ride the line, meaning I'm pushing to the max and I will have some failures where I cross the line and trying to ride at about that pace during training. And that's how you push the boundaries, right? You lift weights. Mm-hmm. Do you ever max out? Do you ever fail on a lift?
Yep.
Okay, point taken. We're gonna try and step on the gas a little bit. So the first run, 100% accountability was a 5:13. Yep. So, all right, let's go a little quicker.
Stand by.
Oh, got caught up in the speed, right? Just ripping rounds.
383.
And then I did not stay with paying attention to confirmation levels, which resulted in me going to prison for a very long time on this last guy, right? So transition was quick, it was there, and I sent it. Still had some movement from that transition, and you know, killed somebody innocent. What was the time?
383.
Okay. Hopefully this helps you kind of from a beginning start point to getting into more advanced stuff. And I also just want to reiterate that the internet has a lot of garbage out there, but it also has a lot of valuable resources. There is a plethora of very talented shooters that put out great information online. Spec Train, Billy Barton, point one tactics, and so many more. This is just something that I do. So if you see value in it, great. I hope it helps you. If you don't and you like some other guy's technique or style, that's okay too. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions on this, leave them in the comments down below, and whatever else you guys want to put down there. Thanks again.